morning, Tri-Cities. It's Friday at 9 o'clock, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from Trideck, and we have a great panel for a discussion today. I want to start off with thanking our sponsor for Coffee with Karl, Mike Miller from Moon Security. You just saw the video. Mike and his crew do an amazing job. We use them here at Trideck offices for fire protection, other security devices. If you have any questions about security for your home, business, anything else, go and see Mike and his great crew in downtown Pasco at Moon Security. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about a phrase that was started here in the Tri-Cities by our own Chancellor Haynes at WSU Tri-Cities, clean up to clean energy. And now everybody, it seems like, at least in the country, has appropriated it. So we're looking forward to a good discussion. I'm going to start with Diane and make introductions. Diane Howard is the Executive Director of Port of Benton and also the leader of Washington Vertical, one of the innovation clusters sponsored by Department of Commerce here in Washington State. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Karl.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. Mandy Wallner is the Economic Development Manager for City of Richland, and also on the Washington Economic Development Alliance Board. She was recognized for her service to that organization recently, as well as winning an award for City of Richland and their partners on creating the targeted urban area manufacturing property tax exemption process. Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning, Karl.
Thanks everybody for hanging in there. I'm trying to remember what everybody's, the proper introduction is for everyone. Wearing a really cool shirt and back in our Zags is our own Sean O'Brien, the Executive Director of Energy Forward Alliance. Good morning, Sean.
Happy Friday. Go Zags.
Go Zags. And David Replog is our Trideck Vice President of Federal Programs, also the Executive Director of Hanford Communities. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
All right. Well, let's get into the mug time. And it's cool that I just introduced David because he gave me this for Christmas. My mug this morning is commemorating the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. So the B Reactor Museum, it's a cool reactor from World War II of the B reactor, which, as we know, is the first operating nuclear reactor in the world that led to victory for the United States in World War II, the Manhattan Project, and obviously going into the Cold War. But it's a cool mug. I really like it. And obviously, the land that we're going to talk about today on Clean Up Clean Energy is from Hanford and formerly the Corps of Engineers and the Atomic Energy Commission and now Department of Energy. So that is my mug. Dan, what do you have for us this morning?
Well, I'm still loyal to Nigel, who's sitting here, and I'm staring at him, my Frenchie. But today, in light of the topic, I brought my beaker cup to also give a shout out to some of our key partners, which is PNNL and WSU Tri-Cities, because without their phenomenal work, we wouldn't have the opportunity to talk about what we're talking about today. Thank you.
Perfect and very fitting. Mandy, how about you? What do you have for a mug for us this morning?
Well, I'm channeling the sunshine springtime vibe and promoting a bit of a little local business, one of my favorite, Coffee Now. They will bring it to me, which also supports my Friday morning coming in hot kind of vibe. So they make a great coffee. So I just thought I'd share and kind of promote that innovation.
That's awesome. And in your function at City of Richland, obviously, huge amount of support that you work with all the small businesses in Richland. And so I think that's a really great shout out. And I have to say that it's great because you always have wonderful plants in your background that the sun's hitting them and they're getting, making some photosynthesis this morning. That's cool.
Clean air this morning.
That's right. Sean, how about what do you have? And I know that what you wanted to have, you couldn't quite get, but what do you got for us?
Well, I would say it's maybe even better. As a non-coffee drinker, I do have water in this, but this morning I am rocking the Energy Northwest mug. Later this morning, the governor will be signing the capital budget, which includes $25 million for Energy Northwest's advanced reactors. So we are super, super excited about this momentous opportunity to demonstrate not only the support of the legislature, but the unanimous support of the state legislature in voting for that budget. So a super exciting day here.
Yeah. Great shout out for Energy Northwest and the team of really everybody that's been working on this for so long. Diane, I know you've been working for years and years and years on this, and Sean, had a chance to go over and wear a couple hats and be on the team this year in Olympia. So just for everybody, today will be a tremendous occasion, and we're all looking forward to celebrating it. So great shout out. David, what do you got for us? And oh yeah, by the way, nice basketball behind you. Who'd you get that basketball from, David?
Yeah, I guess I'll tell my basketball story before I tell the mug story. And I don't know if it shows up too well that far away from the camera, but that although I'm not I don't have any personal connection to Gonzaga University, I did have a chance to go to a game with a former colleague of mine who's now a state representative up in the Spokane area, and went to a reception before the game, and I won this basketball that is signed by 6 different Zags basketball players, 3 on the men's team and 3 on the women's team. One of the men's basketball players happens to be Karl's nephew, Ben Gregg, and so that's I by association I've become at least a big Zags fan. Yeah, I'm proud of my basketball. I also get a chance to sort of rub it in Sean's face from time to time because I'm such a huge fan, and I sort of stumbled into this really cool piece of sports memorabilia. But my mug is, I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera either, but it is a mug that was given to me by the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. We worked with them, and we've been working to partner with them on any number of different things. And at one point, they came by with a neat little gift basket with a number of other things too. But it's an awesome mug, and I've been using it regularly since then.
Very cool and very good, because again, when we're talking about Hanford and the transferred lands, and then what's coming up with these leases in the future, it's a great shout out to really, I think, our partners from our Native American tribes that we've all been working closely with. I know Diane and Mandy with some projects have gotten into the Intertribal Advisory Board that relates to so yeah, really good mug. Okay, so clean up to clean energy. I am going to ask David to kind of kick us off with an overview and background on where we're at, and then we'll go around and talk about what's going on with it and what we're working on together to try to come up with some good alternatives for the Tri-Cities. So take it away, David.
All right. So as you referred to earlier, Karl, the term clean up to clean energy was first coined by Sandra Haynes, who is the chancellor of WSU Tri-Cities, as well as the TriDec board chair. And I think it does a really, really good job of, in just one sentence, capturing a lot of what we want to do as a community. Obviously, we're very invested in cleanup of the Hanford site, but we also see some tremendous opportunities in clean energy, not only in advanced nuclear clean energy generation, but also clean energy technologies and manufacturing and decarbonized industrial processes and any number of other things, research and development, demonstrations. And so that phrase has been such a good one. And we had a chance to kind of share this phrase and this kind of concept with Secretary Granholm and Deputy Secretary Turk in, I guess, 2022. And if nothing else, the phrase really stuck with them, and DOE adopted it as part of this initiative that would take place at the Hanford site, as well as several other sites, DOE sites across the country, where they are looking to use DOE-owned land to support new clean energy projects, clean energy generation projects. And so I'm going to do my best here. Hopefully technology will be in our favor. I'm going to try to share a screen, and the screen will show some of the some of the lands that DOE has identified at Hanford for this Clean Up to Clean Energy program. And so this is the original map. Hopefully you guys are all seeing that. But this is the original map that was released in late August of last year, that identified up to 19,000 acres of land at the Hanford site that could be used for these clean energy projects. Just to make sure we're kind of centered as to where we're at. Down here to the bottom right of the map, that's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Just below that is WSU Tri-Cities and the Port of Benton area. And then to the left, this kind of odd shape here is 1,641 acres of land that was transferred from the Department of Energy to the community back in 2015. and is currently owned by both the Port of Benton and the City of Richland, as well as about 300 acres that's owned by Energy Northwest. And so as part of the process of kind of developing the Clean Up to Clean Energy initiative, DOE asked for information through what they call a request for information period. And so we, and by we, I mean a number of community partners, including City of Richland, Richland Energy Services, Port of Benton, Energy Northwest, Port of Pasco, Benton PUD, and others all kind of came together to develop what we thought was a really compelling vision for at least a portion of this land. And so I'm going to scroll down to the next map, and this is what we included in our response to the request for information. And this map shows that in our mind, we really believe that this area in green is critically important for the community's kind of long-term vision. And I neglected to mention earlier that this long-term vision that we've shared in the RFI really began back in 2009 with the creation of the Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative. And at that time, the Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management at DOE had this idea of creating clean energy parks at DOE cleanup sites, in part because there is this capability that exists because of the workforce. Most of the DOE cleanup sites also have national labs close by. And the reality is, even at Hanford, although it's not going to come for several decades from now, people are working themselves out of a job. So how do you support economic growth and diversification outside of whatever the DOE mission happens to be at that particular site? And so kind of building on that, going back to 2009, and really building on the whole kind of creation of TRIDEC, going back to the Tri-Cities Nuclear Industrial Council back in the early 1960s, which was really focused on not only the Hanford mission, but also more nuclear energy and nuclear research work taking place in our area. And so fast forward again to today and to our RFI response, we asked that they consider either, instead of leasing this land, which is what's being proposed, that they could potentially instead either lease it to the community or just transfer it, at least a portion of it, to the community, so we could develop it to kind of build out this vision. And we also, in particular, feel like this corridor here is especially important, because that connects the 1,641 acres that was already transferred back in 2015 up to Energy Northwest and to where the advanced reactor that, as Karl was mentioning earlier, we are expecting some really good news with the budget proviso that'll support that advanced reactor up there. But the vision is to be able to really, over 5, 10, 20 years, to develop this corridor into a place where we can really demonstrate how to decarbonize industry and how to manufacture and support the supply chain of kind of the technologies that are going to be important for the rest of the century. And so the way that you can really do that is by taking advantage of co-location, by locating clean energy, high heat steam, like the X-Energy reactor that will be up there will produce, and as well as the electricity to support these industrial processes and manufacturing all throughout the corridor, and having them locate right next to each other. We're already beginning to see kind of the beginnings of that develop on the 1,641 acres that was already transferred. Again, you probably can't see it behind my head, but I also have an Atlas Agro hat up there. And Atlas Agro, first ever clean fertilizer manufacturer. It's planned to be located on the 1,641 acres. There's a couple of other clean energy related companies that we're hopeful close to moving in there, as well as another company that could take advantage of the waste heat from Atlas to do carbon-free potato chip manufacturing. All that could, and when you look at how you could kind of build that out again throughout this entire corridor, I think it meets what our goals are as far as generating base load clean energy, but also creating the type of family wage long-term jobs that we're looking for moving forward. And so with that background, I'll share this last map, which is the map that was released in the final request for qualifications just earlier this month by DOE. And we did respond to the draft request for qualifications and kind of continue to provide that input about our vision. And we've had a number of conversations offline with DOE officials. And I should emphasize too that although obviously we have a significant DOE presence at Hanford with the Richland Operations Office and the Office of River Protection, that these decisions are being made at DOE and DC at the headquarters level, and really not within the Office of Environmental Management, but more kind of at the Secretary's office level. But the final RFQ didn't kind of preserve that corridor and didn't at this point seem very responsive to the community's goal to at least preserve it for the time being, so we can kind of build out that vision over time. And instead that the parameters of the RFQ are such that any new development that would take place out there has to be torn down and the land returned to its current state by the end of the cleanup mission. And granted, that's still 50, 60, 70 years from now. But for the type of investment and the type of projects that we're looking to attract, it's hard to imagine an Atlas Agro or another company that's looking at making $1 billion plus investment being willing to do so on land that they don't own and on land that has to be returned to its current condition at some undetermined date in the future. And so it really kind of hamstrings us in terms of our ability to build out this vision that we have put together. One other thing that I'll just jump back up to the original map. One other thing that sort of complicates this whole thing too is going back to the early days of the Manhattan Project. When the federal government came to downtown to build the B reactor and start making plutonium, much of what is now the Hanford site was in private ownership, but a significant portion of it was also owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And that's why you have this checkerboard green and yellow pattern. And so this depicts that, a significant portion of this 19,000 or even going down to the 14,000 acres is technically owned by the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM. And so although TRIDEC as the community reuse organization has unique authority within the Department of Energy to have land transferred to us to support economic development, similar to the 1,641 acres, it's not so clear with BLM. And so I think part of what led DOE to take the approach of leasing the land, or now we're hearing that it might be more of a, I'm forgetting the word, maybe somebody can help me out, an easement, an easement instead of a lease for these projects. But we're hoping that if this land is really not needed for cleanup, that there might be an opportunity for DOE and BLM to look at perhaps a land swap or something like that, or at least, again, at minimum, kind of holding off on obligating this corridor in particular until we have more time to kind of work with them to build out this larger vision. And we have had a number of ongoing conversations with DOE, and I might hand it over to Sean. He was in DC just a couple weeks ago, and had a chance to visit with some of the DOE officials and kind of continue this conversation with them. So Sean, take it from here.
Thanks, David. I think that your point about the fact that the final RFQ didn't necessarily preserve that corridor that we've been focused on, it certainly signals a concern that the department is not hearing our approach. But perhaps even more directly than that was actually their response to questions that we submitted through the draft RFQ process, in which we could ask questions about the process, and they sent those answers back. And they quite directly, we asked them, why are you not considering this community-led and driven approach? And, they said they acknowledge it, but that's not the plan, and they're just moving forward here. And so I think that's where our concerns are is, there's a lot of merit to these proposals. We're not asking for everything under the sun, but we also have a pretty fleshed out vision. And I think so much of that credit is deserved to the community, to folks like Diane and to the city of Richland, who are putting that vision to work right now on the 1,641 acres that were transferred over almost a decade ago. So I think that we want to give them a little bit of a shake to make sure that they can see, hey, we're already doing this. Empower us, build our community's capacity to continue this vision on an even grander scale for a long-term impact for our community, and not just this short-term clean energy generation that they're looking at right now. So, as David mentioned, I had the opportunity to head back to the headquarters just a few weeks ago and meet with folks in the Secretary's office to continue to communicate this vision. And I think demonstrative of the fact that we have a very large federal government. The Department of Energy itself is very large. Here we thought that we had been very actively communicating this vision, and yet we've got to make sure it trickles up all the way, right? And so, I quite just frankly asked, have you seen our response to the RFI? And the response was, well, yeah, or oh, we have a summary of it, and so it's clear that any opportunity we can to continue to paint this vision and to communicate our hopes for this opportunity is worthwhile. And so that much more reason that it's great to be talking about this topic this morning. So, I think in those discussions with the department, they I think also found the merit in our vision and our plan and strategy here, so much so that they would even say kind of things like, oh, so why can't we do that industrial co-location industrial work with the energy generation? And my respectful response was, well, you told us we can't. You told us not to in your responses to the RFQ here. So I think with this initiative, we really want to demonstrate to the department that we want to be partners here. We absolutely love the idea of getting electrons flowing out there as soon as possible. And we want to be with you hand in hand, but we want to do it in a strategic way. We want to do it in a way that gets those electrons flowing, but also doesn't harm our ability to really lean in on those ideas of co-location of other clean energy uses, as well as decarbonized manufacturing and industrial purposes. So we think that there can be an opportunity for a win-win. We think we can do both. Let's get some solar out on specific areas of the site that won't harm our ability to master plan that corridor. But also, Department of Energy, come work with us, come to the table with us, and lean in on perhaps even assisting us with that master planning of that corridor, because they are obviously going to be critical partners here for decades, as we've said. But I think that key piece that David mentioned, that this idea that the projects they're looking at right now are to be removed before the end of the cleanup mission so that the lands are returned back to their current state, is just a bit of a head scratcher. It's not necessarily, especially if we were to do that in just a blanket approach across all of these lands, it's not something that will provide that lasting impact and, again, build that community capacity that this administration is so committed to. So I think as long as we continue to really tell our story, to demonstrate the merit behind our vision, I think that we will get there. But it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're doing so, and that this process doesn't just continue to fly by, because the administration is moving really quickly on this, again, with the expectation that their plan is to announce leases this September. So things are moving quickly, but we're going to be sticking with them and continuing to demonstrate our vision here. So maybe I'll pause there, Karl.
No, thanks, Sean. That was a great, just kind of more recent update on some of those conversations that you've had. Let's go next to Diane. Diane, as both David and Sean said, you've been working on this, both the visioning, the transfer, the everything, the Intertribal Advisory Board, from soup to nuts, and have a lot of knowledge and history and experience in this. And really, I think with especially Washington Vertical and your leadership, you guys have created kind of that next step in the vision with actually a video and stuff. But in fact, I was even reading something yesterday about the community roundtable, and which I think was like 2010, right? And you were leading kind of that energy sector and that new technology sector, even on the roundtable. So can you give us some perspective on this? I mean, from that original Innistria's vision, and then, Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative and stuff, can you give us kind of that overall view? And then love to have, I think Tracy's got the video queued up, which will be a next step, but take it away, Diane.
Thank you, Karl. I appreciate it. I just want to follow up on some of Sean's comments and say, appreciate his advocacy for our community at the federal level, Energy Forward Alliance, and also at the state level. I think the story has been consistent, and we've all done this together as a team and multiple prospects that we've talked about. But you brought it up as well, Karl. It was always envisioned when the Corps turned over the property to the city of Richland and created the city and created the Port of Benton, that transfer and clean energy and development of this type of sector has always been desired by this region. It was hit again under basically a DOE initiative called GNEP, and then that turned into the INES TRIE Clean Energy Parks. So this is not a new sector or a new desire. It is woven into the fabric of our region and our community. And at the end of the day, you know, good economic development, we're trying to reflect the desire of our community and also retain this level of workforce from trades all the way to professional skills, just because of the industrial multiplier that it provides for the region and for the state of Washington. I also think there's a lot of alignment right now, and the timing is historic between the desires of the federal government and the state of Washington, and then what we could do on clean energy security, national security, and in so many ways. So very excited about that. And the one comment we used to always get was, well, what does the community want? What's the community's vision, right? So Washington Vertical was formed in January of 2022. It's the next evolution in partnership with the State Department of Commerce. It's an international cluster model, which is very well known in Germany, UK, Japan, other areas and regions. But the difference in economic development is that it's really led by industry primarily. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But right now we have 175 members, and we're really working to solve industry-wide challenges to put together the supply chain that's going to be needed around advanced nuclear reactors, as well as other clean energy technologies. So back to the vision part. So that's why this vision and this property and this opportunity is so critical to our region, and why we're seeing the impacts that we already are in the last couple of years. And so back to your question, you were asking about, you know, they wanted to know what our vision was, and they wanted to know our thinking. So back in 2022, 2023, we put together the video that's going to play now, and we've used this team right here, as well as others, have used this in our prospect and recruiting discussions and in our conversations at both the state and federal level. So I'll let the video play now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Tri-Cities, Washington. The Northwest's clean energy hub. Home to leading research, technology, and manufacturing industries with a global impact. An experienced workforce with a strong talent pipeline. Where an industry-led innovation cluster and community partners are transforming an advanced clean energy park vision into a reality. The place to create, manufacture, and deploy next-generation products and technologies. A U.S. manufacturing center and transportation hub for components of clean energy systems to be shipped worldwide. Working with the Department of Energy on planning for future community economic development. Unlimited potential for future growth to support the transition to a net zero economy. This is the place. Join us. The Northwest Advanced Clean Energy Park, accelerating the nation's clean energy future.
That was awesome. And I have to give Tracy and our team props because we've tried to play it many times, like on different formats, and it turned out really good. We could hear it and everything worked really good. The technology age we live in, there's always that little glitch, but that was really cool. I think I just wanted to jump in here before we go to Mandy, and because I was just thinking about, gosh, was it last year, Diane, that we had the memorial for Bob Ferguson at the new Hanford History building that you guys built next to your place? And I was just thinking, before he moved to Arizona, which is going back, gosh, David, was it 2 or 3 years ago? You and I met with them, and I'd never met Bob Ferguson before. So those you don't know Bob, he grew up in Dover, Idaho. His dad worked in a sawmill, and he was really fortunate that he got a scholarship to go to Gonzaga Prep in Spokane, and then went on to Gonzaga, and then he was in the Army, and he was in the Atomic Energy Commission. I mean, I think he ran the B reactor for a while, right? Like when you go to the B reactor, you can sit in the seat, and Bob, when David and I talked to him a couple of years ago, he said, like, yeah, I could probably get it fired back up. Like he was just this icon really in our community around nuclear. The manager that managed the kind of the end of the Columbia Generating Station construction project, and figured all that out. And I just was struck by, Diane, to your point about the state support, signified now with the funding that the governor will sign later today. I asked him, like, why was the forerunner of Energy Northwest going to build 5 reactors of different designs and different locations, and why did they take this on? And he said there was this forecast that came out of World War II that just showed electrical demand, just 45-degree slope coming up. And he said ultimately, even with everything else they faced, there just wasn't the power demand back there. And I think the thing that's changed that seems, and as I think about this will be a good segue to Mandy to talk about power, but what we see now, because of decarbonization, because of federal and state efforts, that we have this power demand. And it's not just electrical power. When we think about new nuclear, advanced nuclear that can provide that high temperature steam that David talked about, and this corridor and the shared infrastructure, we can decarbonize industries with heat, right? There's so many thermal things that we don't have to use electricity. We could use, if we had this waste heat after you make electricity, like it's this real opportunity. And so going back to that Bob Ferguson example, I think we are at a 45 or even steeper slope on what our energy demands are now because of all these other things that are going on. Like it's just, it's come back around, what, 50, some years later, right? And we're kind of back on that slope. So I think that's a big driver and the immediate importance of this corridor, of fulfilling this vision that's been worked on for a long, long time for that. And now let's go to Mandy to talk about from the city's perspective, which the city does have its own electrical utility. It's been a key partner, even in some of the development of the 1641, the transferred acreage that the city and the Port of Benton and Energy Northwest own together. But Mandy, do you want to talk about maybe some of the things that we've all worked on together that have helped bring in some of these companies, some of, like the targeted urban area, property manufacturing, property tax exemption, kind of what the city of Richland's plan is for that acreage, and then, the future growing into the corridor. And then from a utility perspective, just give it some insights on, even related to transmission and what's needed even for more solar generation on the Hanford site related to that. So I think take it away, Mandy.
There's a lot of things in that bucket, Karl, but I will endeavor to accomplish as many of them as I can remember. And when I forget, please remind me. So
I can cue you up because David actually gave me some notes. Like I didn't take notes when we went for, but now I have notes. So if you need something, just let me know.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, David.
I think that, the city, of course, is a willing partner, and we're definitely excited to implement the vision that was started well before I was here and even my predecessors, and in that clean energy vision and the implementation and doing our best to position us as a utility and a service provider. We're unique in this area to be a one-stop shop as far as permitting and utility services. And so being able to utilize those tools in recruitments and coming to the table in that partnership, we can offer almost everything that a company needs with exception to natural gas. And so making sure that we're well positioned to do those things. And Bonneville Power is probably the only thing we've not mentioned this morning as one of the things related to this area. And I think that the challenges that we have with Bonneville Power and supplying us into this clean energy future, a lot of the technologies we're talking about, at least initially, are dependent on some of that electrical load and being able to supply that, whether it's through the city or bringing it to the city to be able to, you know, plug in and that base load. And we've always had the hydropower, which, you know, the city is fortunate to be able to provide over 90% clean energy to our customers, but making sure we can maintain that in the long term and where that comes from. And so those are challenges that as a team, we've all been kind of fighting in the background to make sure that we can accommodate these new technologies and these new companies that are energized by all the funding and all of the excitement around clean energy and around, you know, the supply chains associated and the funding available. And so, as we all know, they move faster than sometimes the pace of city government and federal government and all the funding, but we want to make sure that we can meet their timelines. And so getting all the pieces and parts to line up is where we try to come to the table and do our best to accommodate and build those partnerships and connectivity to get that to make that happen for these companies, because I think a lot of them don't necessarily understand all the background. And so that's been an exciting piece to be a part of, where the city was able to come to the table in a little bit different way than we've done before, was to create this targeted urban area, which applies to all the city and port property north of Richland that has an heavy industrial zoning, that will attract those new advanced manufacturing jobs, clean energy jobs that have specific outcomes. And so there's job creation, there's a minimum investment for infrastructure, buildings, and making sure that those companies accomplish some milestones. And then the city will, for a period of 10 years, abate property taxes on those improvements. And where there's a benefit to the city is that these are things that are not already on our tax roll. They're things that we otherwise would not have cited here without this. So the targeted urban area tax exemption makes us competitive with other states and regions, really to be able to serve this area the best that we can, in addition to all of our other fantastic service resources and partnerships. I think it actually helps the rubber meet the road as far as finance, because I think money talks, right? And so being able to have that tool in all of our tool chests, I think, has served us well already. We've seen 2 recruitments that have been, I think, successful in part because of this program, in addition to 2 retention efforts that I think were made, added the exclamation point to the end, at least, to the success on those, and being able to offer that and keep those companies here, those expansions here, and those jobs for our workforce. So I think I'll pause there because there may be something else I need to answer, but
it's a really in-depth topic, but could you talk a little bit more on electrical, like from the utilities perspective on, so you just, I think you did a good job of overviewing how a couple recruiting prospects, a couple retention prospects, and expansion, where the targeted urban area, the manufacturing property tax exemption has made the city and the port competitive enough that companies picked to stay and expand or grow here. But can you give us some overview, Mandy, on the kind of prospects that we're seeing that could be future partners with us in this corridor that we want to preserve and lease and build out, right, all the way out to Energy Northwest? And tell us a little bit about how much energy does it take for these clean technologies to come, Mandy, and how complex is that to deliver on?
well, I will do my best to explain it in a way that is palatable, because I'm not sure I've totally grasped it. But Clint Whitney, our energy services director, does a great job. So if you have a chance to hear him, he can explain it, but I'll do my best. So where we've seen a lot of recruitments, and I think we've in the past maybe struggled in responding, was that they're large loads. In order to make these clean energy products and the fueling needed for some of these micro modular or small modular reactors, in order to be able to accomplish that, I think the smallest we've seen is 100 megawatts, which in one single load for us, there aren't any in the city. And so how do you supply that? And I think that was a big thing for us to get our arms around. And then when we started seeing 200 megawatts, we're like, I don't know how that is even possible. How do they don't really need that. And then we see 300 megawatts. And so we're going, okay, we're going to figure it out. And so that's where we've been fortunate to be able to leverage partnerships. Clint's been great in his group to reach out to BPA and do all the things that we possibly can to find 300 megawatts of power. A lot of times it's going to be through a power purchase agreement where the power comes in from other localities and is serviced through the city of Richland. Could be through BPA's network, could also be external. But making sure that we have the infrastructure on the ground through substations and transmissions that's the word, but all the components that are needed to service those energy customers. And then again, working with EPA to get the cord that plugs it in, which I think is the piece that I didn't necessarily realize, but there were two components, right? It's the power itself and being able to provide it and have it available, but then also the cord to plug it in. So while we're all working on cellular networks and everything is wireless and we, our day-to-day life is not necessarily that way, we are looking for the cord to plug it in. So being able to provide that in this corridor, I think that we can stack the interested customers and people that would love to be able to take advantage of that available power. And so we are trying to be the best position to provide it, and we're on our way. It's a long timeline, a long horizon. And so we're about halfway through that process in those assessments and feasibilities. And I believe, and I think many others do too, that if we get to the end of that and it's successful, then that will shorten the process for future prospects. And so being able to say that we have some interested customers that are on board to walk through that with us and experience all of the patient moments that we need to have, I think is only going to help us build that future in that corridor to be able to supply those customers in short order.
That's really well said, because we've got another potential industry that's been very, very hard to decarbonize, right? That as the city works forward with your partners on this transmission line, there could be others that could benefit from that line. They could, potentially help pay for it. And it's exactly what we're talking about. It's this cluster concept that Diane's led for so long. And, it's the opportunity that it's not just one company that needs one thing. I think that's really where we are. And I think it's kind of cool because it kind of goes back to like the Industrial Revolution, right? Like back then, if you wanted to have a factory, you had to build your own power plant. So you had to have it on site. You didn't do transmission. Transmission's kind of, the grid is like this more modern concept. But as we move forward and we start to look at decarbonization, it's sort of like those old ideas come back. And so, microgrids, local power production, obviously that come from, advanced nuclear and those things, those are real opportunities. And I think you're talking about some of the recent projects that we've all worked on together and kind of like how crazy it gets. I was thinking, Diane, I think you told me one time that, there's this project that came out from the state and we all looked at it and it seems like it was like a gigawatt, right? Like 1,000 megawatts for, I think it was solar panel manufacturing or something like that. And, we just kind of laughed at it. Like there's no way on transmission and especially on power that we could even touch it. And then Diane, didn't you get a call up, later and somebody was kind of like, hey, why didn't you submit or something like that? Wasn't that,
Yeah, they think that we can just, plug them in. And
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
compliments to the City of Richland Utility and the partnership there. These are, they need all of these companies for manufacturing needs 24/7 day a week, non-emitting baseload power.
Yeah.
And that's why this collaboration is so important for us. It does create an opportunity for the future of this region. And we really do have the opportunity as a region to be the example for the rest of the state and the nation. If, you mentioned 90% non-emitting from Richland, but region-wide, we're 87% already non-emitting. As Bob Schutz says, right, if we can't close the gap here and be successful, we have the opportunity to do that. We've got the pipeline of workforce that can step up and make this happen. And we've now got the companies with interest. And I think that's really critical for us to figure out a solution. But over, 10 megawatts, we've got to work together with these industry partners because to your point, they've got to find a way to serve their power need and their load. And again, huge compliments to City of Richland's leadership and helping us and being at the table to figure out solutions and working in a collaborative way. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think Tracy put it in the chat, but if anyone that's watching us on Zoom has a question, you can always ask it through the question and answer feature down below. If you're watching us on social media, you can put your questions in the comments and we'll get to them. Let's open it back up. And I think let's go back to Department of Energy, because I think, in many of our conversations, and I'm just been here 4 years, and I've learned so much from all of you guys, really. But like, we think of DOE as just like one entity, and I think what this example on clean energy, these conversations show us that it's a very complex, federal agency that has many divisions. And sometimes I think the way they're set up, like, you have to almost go to the Secretary's office to be able to get somebody that has kind of authority or, over these different divisions. Because obviously locally with Hanford Cleanup, we're working with the environmental EM. What's the M, David? EM.
Office of Environmental Management.
Thank you. And so that's what they do, and they're solely focused on that. But then, they have authority for this ground, but they are solely focused on the cleanup mission, which is right. That's the way they're doing it. So I think Sean and David both alluded to that this is coming from the Secretary's office. But then when you get up at that level, the office doesn't have the knowledge that the folks on the ground do, and the complexities. And I think on the Hanford site, right, like, and people say like, oh, why does it take so long and it's so hard to clean up? We don't need to get into that today, but what I've learned is that the Hanford site is unique because of its history, because of the 1855 treaties that were signed by some of our tribal partners, that is an added complexity that other cleanup sites don't have. But the opportunity that we're talking about still relates to the same reason that the federal government picked it in 1943, and that is the Columbia River hydroelectric power that started with Grant Cooley back then, and now is built out through the Bonneville Power Administration and others. It's still the same reason, and it just feels like, I think, Sean, maybe the conversation that you alluded to is like, once they know about it, like once this vision that we've all created, they're like, oh, this is great. And really, I think for all of us to sell it even harder than we already are, because we know we've been selling it really, really hard for a long time, to make sure that they know what that is, because where else in the country are they going to get that, right? I mean, I think that's even a lot of, to some degree, the interest from solar developers on the clean energy lease request for qualifications and proposals, is that where else are you going to go and maybe get a shot at leasing 10,000 contiguous acres from one landowner, right? Which is the federal government, which has all these initiatives and funding to support renewable energy generation. So it's putting all those things together. But for all of us, it's really important that we continue to move forward. And so we do have a question from an anonymous attendee that asks, how does Western Vertical and CISA facilitate potential projects concepts to the actual local construction capabilities? And Dan, can you kind of obviously take that one, but tell us a little bit more about what you guys are focused on around the clean energy supply chain that you guys are doing such a good job on.
Yep. Thank you for the question. So Vertical has set up project teams, and I'll kind of highlight those in our partnership with the Clean Energy Supplier Alliance. First and foremost, we got project team that's led by Energy Northwest to bring the XD100 to fruition, and really excited about that. We work on helping to grow the market on, like, a little bit of what you heard today on, that's really city and port partnership and making sure that our assets and infrastructure is ready. The great work on the TUA that's had the leadership from the city of Richland. And then the Port of Benton is working on intermodal facilities so that we can make sure that we're moving products in and out. That's the whole goal here. And then attracting capital, grants, education, and advocacy. But now to the question. So working with the Clean Energy Supplier Alliance, again, Vertical, that is an industry-led, and a lot of our industry is part of the Clean Energy Supplier Alliance. And they're focusing on readying the workforce in coordination with trades and our other workforce development partners. And then the Nuclear Quality Management Center. So the Supplier Alliance right now is really enabling suppliers to help close the gaps. And what Vertical did was an initial gap analysis of the supply chain. And they're really kind of taking that work that we did and they're trying to find the solutions for it. And also modeling under the UK Fit for Nuclear that was being led right now in the US by NEI. And so that is kind of the focus there. And then second, we want to make sure that we're readying the next generation of suppliers. So making sure that they're ISO 9000 certified, for example. And then we also have a lot of great local small businesses here, and we want to make sure that they're ready to go. One great example of that would be Fluid Controls that's working, Russ works with Bechtel and was part of that mentoring program. So they're sharing that knowledge with the other industry suppliers, and we're making sure that basically making sure that those smaller companies are ready to step up and be subs or be primes or partner and work together. They have also set up a database portal that they're working for collaboration called Monday. And that's kind of a portal where all the industries get in and maybe they'll work together to coordinate and collaborate how they're going to respond to a proposal. And then the third piece that they're working on too is accelerating advanced manufacturing. We also have other resources and programs that Tetra Tech is helping lead that industry side and bringing those pieces to the table for the rest of our industry folks. But on accelerating the manufacturing, the other piece that we're working on with the Clean Energy Supplier Alliance is making sure that we're reshoring the capabilities back to the gap analysis that I mentioned. We know that we need to reshore some of the capabilities back to the United States for manufacturing. And part of that is the PM HIP, powder metallurgy, hot isostatic pressing, or for lack of a better word, forging capabilities. And then we're also seeing the crossover of that between advanced nuclear, other clean energy manufacturing, and aerospace, believe it or not. And a lot of those shops, so we head up to the Spokane area in the I-90 conference. And again, we're connecting our industry and our companies with them and bringing them down here. Again, we're trying to create the new supply chain that doesn't presently fully exist around this technology and to be ready. So that was a long answer and I apologize, but hopefully that answered the question. Thank you.
There we go. I'm on mute. Sorry, Diane. Thank you. I think what I've learned is that, the existing nuclear supply chain is very focused on the existing technology, right? Which is very custom, is very low volume, but extremely high quality. And so I think the challenge that you guys have been doing really good work on is like, how do you take that quality, which will still be needed, and then get it into higher volume parts, which small modular reactors and other advanced reactors do. So you guys are doing a great job. We're down to 6 minutes, and I wanted to loop back around to David and Sean. You guys let us off. You haven't had a chance to say much lately, but is there anything else that you can kind of help wrap us up with, and then we'll go to closing remarks. But what is there anything that we haven't talked about yet on clean up clean energy and why this really is so critically important for our community to make sure that we have, kind of preserve, if nothing else, if not lease or transfer this space for all of our future uses? It's a jump ball. Nobody's coming off of mute.
Go ahead, John, if you want to get started.
Okay. I think I'll just underscore a point that David made earlier is the fact of the matter is these lands are being opened up to, which just demonstrates the fact that they are not needed for the cleanup mission. And so, again, we want to be active partners with the department here, but we also, at the end of the day, should very much recognize that it just makes sense to transfer these lands back to the local community to be able to so that we can equip ourselves to lead our vision, and frankly, take the onus off of the federal government. I think the one thing that our friends at the site here, our local DOE friends, would love nothing more than to lessen that scope of responsibility they have for lands so that they can continue to laser focus on the cleanup mission needs. So I think, again, we're going to do everything we can amidst this current moving process. But at the end of the day, we also are going to continue to, I think, communicate our vision that these lands should be transferred back so that we can, again, build that community capacity that the department and the administration continue to say that they want to equip us with. So I think that's key here.
Yeah, of course, I agree with all of that, and I think really good points. I think the one thing I would kind of go back to what you were alluding to, Karl, earlier, that and Sean too, that the Department of Energy is a big beast. There's a lot of different offices. There's a lot of different programs that run around throughout the entire agency. And I think I just want to kind of reemphasize that I think our vision really aligns with, at the highest level, what DOE wants to do, whether it's clean energy generation or decarbonizing hard to decarbonize industries or manufacturing, and also supporting local job creation and economic development and diversification adjacent to DOE sites. Where we do kind of run into challenges is, Office of Environmental Management and the Office of Science and the Office of Nuclear Energy and the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations and the Grid Deployment Office. All of these are in Office of Electricity. They all, none of them report up to the same person until you get to the Secretary's office. And so what we need to continue to keep doing is to try to communicate at that high level and work with them, hopefully, to kind of marshal all those resources and trickle on down throughout the rest of the agency. And one thing I might add too is that we have had a number of throughout this entire process, we've been keeping our congressional offices updated with kind of what we're doing. And we just spoke with several of them a couple days ago. And one example is Congressman Newhouse had a chance to ask Secretary Granholm specifically about this just, I think, last week. And she was not aware that there were some of these concerns in the community, but getting these questions and these conversations taking place at that high of a level, I think also helps our efforts. And so we really appreciate him asking the question. Again, we're also working with our Senator's office as well as Congresswoman McMorris-Rodgers, and we're hopeful that between all of our collective efforts at the local level and us communicating directly to DOE, as well as our congressional delegation supporting the effort as well, we can kind of have that make that connection.
I think we're also delivering, if I could add in, we're delivering not only in how we serve the nation back in Manhattan Project, but we also have Framatome, 50 years in our backyard, 5% of the nation's electricity that has the capability to meet the needs of DOE. And they're right here, right now, along with the joint venture with UltraSafe. And then I think we're proving it as well across the street on the lands that was transferred. We're trying to be strategic. I think that's the difference this time too, is, when Hanford was created, industry wasn't necessarily placed around it. For this new advanced reactor need demand and clean energy need demand, we do need to all of your points, that innovation ecosystem, for lack of a better word, that industrial symbiosis, that we need those industries here. I think that's what provides us but what we have is a solid foundation, and I think that we're delivering. So to Sean's point, turning those lands over in collaboration with the community, with all of our community and working together, I think that we're showing that we're able to deliver projects that we've got in the queue between Richland and the port. We have 1,000 jobs right now and $4.5 billion in investment in the last 4 years. I think that's delivery. And so a huge shout out, since I'm at the end of my time, to just also remember Gary Peterson, because Gary Peterson was adamant, and Mike Lawrence, about the desires for this to be accomplished for the state, for this region, and for this community. And Vertical's launching off of all of this work, and we just are so thankful and grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. That was a great remembrance of Gary. Gary Peterson, that was a long-serving, really community champion that we lost last year, and so thank you for that. we're at time, so I'm going to call it. I think we all got a chance to have a really good discussion today. Mandy, Dan, Sean, and David, thank you all for joining us today. This is really critically important. This is what we're all about. And from the TriDeck perspective, since we're all partners, we all work at this. When we talk about TriDeck, we're talking about the whole community. So this is a great demonstration of how we work together and what we're going to make sure that we make that the community will have access to those lands, and ultimately we're going to make sure that it happens. That's all of our mission working together. For everybody out there in Coffee with Karl land, next week we're going to have Michael Novakovich and his team at Columbia Ability Alliance on. So next week at 9, we'll have them on if you want to join us again. Thanks everybody for your time this weekend. Have a great weekend. And Sean, can you take us away with the big go Zags? Did we already lose them? Oh my gosh. Okay, then I'll give it. Go Zags. Thanks everybody.